All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Hunting Illinois Podcast. In this episode, we're going to go over some season dates and reminders, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about rut hunting. So, with a bunch of reminders for us, we're going to start off with Dan. I know you got a big list there of all the things coming up and some seasonal updates. So, go for it.
Yeah, it's a busy time of year. Obviously, we're getting towards the latter portion of October. Days are getting shorter. A lot of things going on, but it's also a great time to be an Illinois hunter. Pretty much everything is either open or getting ready to open in the next little bit. So exciting time to be out there. But first thing I just always want to remind people of time change. So it's that wonderful time of the year that we'll turn our clocks back on November 3rd. So we'll turn them back 1 hour. So what this means for us as hunters, you get to wake up a little earlier each morning. It's unfortunate, but it's part of being an American, I suppose. Another really important update that I want to talk about.
Doesn't the sun celebrate daylight savings time too?
Does it? It should. It should. The Illinois DNR released the preliminary results for the 2024 youth firearm deer season, which occurred October 12th through the 14th. This year's total harvest was 4,057, which is about an 11% decline compared to last year's, which the total last year was 4,576. So what's interesting, though, is it doesn't seem to be completely level across the board. I know right before we started recording, Jason was talking. There's a few counties that actually saw a nice increase over last year, but then other counties saw a little bit of a decline. So it seemed to be pretty scattered. And from my recollection, it seemed like the weather was quite productive that weekend. I remember, we were talking, and it looked like it was low 60s, not a ton of wind, not a ton of precipitation. So I'll be curious to see kind of some more details on that report and kind of dive into what the cause of that little decline was, but nothing too substantial. Another big update: if you hunt in the following counties, Champaign, Douglas, Macon, Moultrie, or Payette, throughout the month of October, you are not able to harvest an antlerless deer in those counties during the archery season. That changes October 31st. So starting November 1st, archery hunters in those counties will now be eligible to harvest antlerless deer again in those specific counties starting November 1st. And I know personally I'm excited about that. A lot of the areas I hunt are in those counties, and I've had a few sits where I've had nothing but antlerless deer walk under me. So I'm excited to be able to harvest an antlerless deer in the next little bit. One data source I personally like to follow a lot, and I know Jason and Curtis and Lauren do too. It's one of these things that we as public land hunters, I think, need to be very conscious and aware of, is the crop progress. Especially the lands that a lot of us hunt, we are surrounded by big ag. And we see it time and time again. Once that ag starts to be removed from the landscape and the corn is either cut, harvested, those beans are harvested, you start to see almost this migration of deer back to the forest and back to the timber. And so I always like to kind of monitor these crop progress reports that the U.S. Department of Ag puts out, just to see what the totality of harvest looks like. Are we earlier than last year? Are we later than last year? Are we about at the same? So the most recent report was published on October 28th. So just yesterday, we're recording on October 29th. And currently 87% of the corn in Illinois has been harvested. That's up from about 78% this exact same week in 2023, and up quite a bit from the 5-year average for this week, which is normally at 73%. So we're a little bit earlier in terms of harvest than normal. That makes me excited. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of the public land I hunt is surrounded by big ag. So once that corn starts to get removed, personally, that's when I really start a lot of my deer hunting, is once that corn's gone. And about 87% of the state's corn has been harvested. Soybean follows.
You mentioned that, I always like to mention a guy by the name of Bob Folkrod, who really made a name for himself with a hunting tactic of just utilizing standing corn, because he realized, hey, these deer are just spending all their time in the standing cornfields. Why would they ever leave? People aren't coming in there to bother them. They've got cover, they've got food, they can often find liquid. And he would take off his boots, walk in his socks, and walk with his bow row to row slowly. And he harvested a heck of a lot of mature bucks doing that method. Pretty crazy. Look him up, and you'll see why once the corn is gone, the woods come alive, like Dan said. Fun time to be there.
What was his name again?
Bob Folkrod.
That's got to be an exciting way to hunt. Oh,
Yeah, he's way up in age now, so I'm sure he's probably not still doing it unless he's got one of those like rolling amphibious wheelchair things going row to row. But yeah, back in the day, that was his tactic, Bob Folkrod.
so the Illinois soybean harvest follows a fairly similar trend. 90% of the soybeans in Illinois have been harvested. That's up from about 86% last year, the same time, and up from the 5-year average, which is at 80%. So we're quite a bit further along in terms of harvest, both in terms of last year as well as the 5-year average. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the precipitation. It's been extremely dry, especially throughout the central part of the state, most fall into late summer. So I think that kind of pushes things up quite a bit. One other thing I like to pay particular attention to, especially as a waterfowl hunter, is winter wheat. And so the crop progress report has a couple different statistics and stuff you can look at on winter wheat. The one I pay most attention to is the emergence. So how much of the winter wheat that's been planted is actually starting to emerge and coming through the soil. And right now we're at about 55% of that winter wheat has emerged. And that's pretty much the exact same percentage as last year at this time. So not a huge change year over year on the winter wheat side, but something I, again, as a waterfowl hunter, I like to pay special attention to and kind of keep those fields in the back of my mind, especially for Canada geese and maybe some potentially snow goose hunting during the conservation order. Another pretty important data source that I think all hunters probably routinely watch, but something I like to give a lot of credit to is the weather. Personally, it is flipping warm in central Illinois today and across much of Illinois. So we're recording this on October 29th. Today and tomorrow, as well as kind of either throughout later of the week, we're getting pretty high. So we're talking about, highs in the lower 80s, 82, 83, and kind of lows in the mid 60s. But what I'm excited about is looking at the 10-day forecast. You're starting to see a little bit of a reduction. We're going to get back to the average. We're going to start getting the highs in the mid to low 60s and the lows in the mid 50s. But one thing I'm paying special attention to is looking at the tail end of that 10-day forecast. And you're starting to see the potential for a pretty substantial cold front to start moving through Illinois, kind of that November 7th through November 8th, which, if you know anything about deer hunting, that's about the best we could ask for. Again, this is a 10-day forecast, subject to change, very, very obviously. But I'm already watching that cold front, seeing if we're going to get that, because that's one of those things that if you get a cold front during that kind of first or second week in November, you're going to see more rut activity than you've seen in quite some time. And again, it's important to clarify the weather doesn't cause rut, but what it can cause is just them to be a little bit more active, and especially more active during daylight hours. So always kind of pay attention to that weather and keep an eye on that cold front. If it pulls through, we could have a really good rut this year. So keep an eye on that.
I would also say potentially more predictable too, because the first cold day, if it's really cold for us, it's probably cold for them. So start to think, and what bedding areas do you know of that are going to be warm bright and early in the morning? That might be a good place to look.
I think so, because right now they're calling for, lows during that cold front to be in kind of the low 30s. We're probably going to get a decent frost here and there. And just to kind of expand on your comment, Curtis, I think it's important to think of it both ways too. One thing I especially like to look for during deer season is just a big change in the temperature, whether it's going, a severe cold front and then you have a warm day, or you have a bunch of warm weather and then a cold day. Usually for me, that first day, that's a big change. I see a big uptick in activity. So I think this is a perfect stage where we could have some of the best, activity in the whitetail woods, looking at kind of November 7th through the 10th, assuming this forecast continues to hold and continues to develop into that cold front. A couple other things to mention. We have waterfowl season. It is open in some zones and getting ready to open in other zones. We have Sam Klimas, who's a project waterfowl leader for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and we're going to turn it over to him for a quick, brief waterfowl forecast.
Welcome to the Illinois Outdoor Report. I am Sam Klimas, a waterfowl project manager for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And I'm here to relay a brief season forecast for the 24-25 waterfowl season. It's that time of year again. Crisp air, falling leaves, and the unmistakable call of Canada geese overhead. We are gearing up for an upcoming waterfowl season, and today we'll dive into what hunters can expect this fall, including a flight forecast for the upcoming season, some predicted fall climate conditions, and tips to make your hunt a success. Let's start with flight estimates for this fall. According to the latest data from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, we're expecting an additional 1.5 million ducks in the fall flight as compared to last year. This estimate is of the overall duck population, and it increased about 10% as compared to last year. The overall species, like mallard, widgeon, and green-winged teal, saw notable increases and really drove this bump from last year. And this uptick is largely attributed to favorable breeding conditions in the prairie pothole region. Many wetlands across the breeding grounds have experienced a much-needed shot of rain late in the spring months, which may not have helped during peak nesting season, but definitely put solid brood water on the landscape and may have boosted some of those re-nesting efforts that happen after failed initial nesting efforts. Let's dig into the Illinois fall flight forecast. Spring and summer rains were timely in 2024. Illinois DNR managers of our hunting areas noted average to exceptional habitat conditions across many of the Illinois River, Mississippi River, and Southern Illinois sites. Dry conditions midsummer allowed for many sites to promote dense stands of moist soil plants and agricultural crops for fall and winter duck food. Weather conditions also have a lot to do with duck migration. Meteorologists indicate a milder autumn for much of Illinois, with slightly above average temperatures through November. This could affect timing and behavior of migratory birds. Ducks may linger longer in northern habitats if conditions are still favorable for them to do so. December and January are expected to be colder than average, creating perfect conditions for hunting as birds search for open water and food sources. Late season duck and goose hunting could benefit from the more extreme weather event. Now, here are a few tips to make those trips afield successful. Number one is scout frequently. Get out there and scout your favorite spots. Conditions can change rapidly. Knowing where the birds are feeding and resting will improve your chances significantly. Decoy placement. Use a variety of decoys to make natural movements. Setting decoys in groups with some spaced out can create a more realistic scene that attracts incoming birds. Stay concealed. Make sure you remain concealed and remember to keep movement to a minimum. Ducks and geese can pick out movement from long distances. Be mindful of your gear. Make sure gear is in top shape before the season kicks off. Check your decoys, calls, and waders. It's a great time to clean your shotgun and make sure your hunting license and stamps are in order. Lastly, hunt with the wind. Ducks prefer to land into the wind. Setting up with your decoys in front of you with the wind at your back will give you a better chance for successful shots when they come in. As we prepare for this exciting season, remember that every hunt is a chance to connect with nature, spend times with friends and family, and create lasting memories. So gear up, stay informed, and get ready for a fantastic fall of waterfowl hunting in Illinois.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. And I know, Curtis, you kind of dove into the Forbes waterfowl inventory. How are those numbers looking?
Yeah, so they just recently flew. They had to break it up into 2 days because they got fogged out of the lower Illinois River Valley on the 24th. But they flew most of the survey on October 24th, finished it up on the 25th when the fog let out. So you can only do so much. And basically, ducks a little bit below the long-term average. So along the Illinois River Valley, they were 12% below the 10-year average. They still counted just under 200,000 ducks in that area, a little bit below the 10-year average, though. And then in the Mississippi River area, they were 45% below the 10-year average, with just about 76,000 ducks counted. So considerably below the 10-year average on the Mississippi River area then. And in his inventory of species, it looks like, at least in the Illinois River Valley, at least, teal, widgeon, pintail, gadwall are all right where to be expected this time of year. And the reason for the decline is they're lacking mallards, shovelers, and the early migrating divers are not around in much numbers yet. So that accounts for most of that. Now, personally, I went out and scouted a couple areas of habitat. along the Mississippi River. And I did see some mallards using some habitat. So there is some mallards if you do have good habitat around, but it's kind of been dry. So habitat conditions are probably not ideal. Now, he didn't talk a whole lot about habitat that he saw in the flight, but my guess is water availability in the marsh is probably a little bit lower than where it should be. And if we get a good soaking rain, probably help to bring those habitat numbers up, get some new food for the ducks, and help them stick around a little bit. Because there is some good news out there, because even with the little bit of lower numbers that we've got counted around here, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service released their 2024 waterfowl population survey, and they actually got an increase for the first time since 2015. So that's good news. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's still some species that were down. Pintail, for example, 11% down this year, 49% below the long-term average. I don't think they count pintail the best, because guess what? When I was banding geese up in the Arctic, the most numerous duck around was pintail everywhere. And if you look at eBird, Sibley, all this stuff, they don't even think that they really nest up there. So I don't think they count pintail nest as well as they do other species. But American widgeon, for some reason, 55% increase this year. So everybody expect more widgeon this year, which I, for one, am fine with that. I love widgeon. They're beautiful birds. I think they taste good. They're actually the most herbivorous of all the ducks in general. So they eat more vegetative matter than all the other puddle ducks on average when they evaluate their diet. So 55% increase, which is 12% above the long-term average. So a lot of widgeon out there. Mallards, which is the one that just so many duck hunters are concerned with, 6.6 million mallards estimated this year, 8% up from last year. Still 16% below the long-term average, but up from last year. In a state like Illinois, where, it all depends on habitat. If we have good habitat and good weather, it doesn't matter so much if we have 6.6 million mallards or 10 million mallards or 2 million mallards. If we have good habitat and good weather, we're going to have good hunting in Illinois. And if we don't, we may not. So definitely watch that weather. And one weather I always like to talk about is Wind Finder. So search that up on your phone or your computer, windfinder.com, used by basically pilots and sailors and this type of thing. It's only wind. And it gives you basically a nationwide view of the wind patterns throughout the country that you can see at a glance, and you can cycle through about 7 or 8 days and see what's happening. And duck hunters, this is going to become your friend, because just wait until there's arrows in wind pointing from where the ducks are to where you are, and hunt on those days, and you're going to probably have a good time.
Awesome. I tell you what, I know I'm personally ready to get back out for waterfowl. Had a couple decent hunts during the early Canada goose season, but I'm looking forward to getting on a couple duck hunts here shortly. So definitely going to check out that wind checker and keep an eye on things. I like it.
Wind Finder.
There we go. I like it. Awesome. Well, thanks, Curtis. We'll move right along to Upland. Obviously, like we said, it's October 29th, so we are just a few days away from a lot of the upland seasons kicking off. Pheasant season begins November 2nd and runs through January 8th in the North Zone, and November 2nd through January 15th in the South Zone. Quail is the exact same dates as pheasants. And then rabbit season is also getting ready to open. That opens November 2nd and closes February 15th statewide. I'm going to quickly turn it over to Don Cal from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. He is the Ag and Grasslands Wildlife Program Manager, and he's going to give us a quick upland hunting forecast and what the populations of pheasant, quail, and rabbit look like. So take it away, Don.
Mild conditions last winter led to high survival rates of pheasants and bobwhites, which was reflected in our upland bird route surveys. As compared to the 2023 surveys, quail observations per survey stop were up 34%, with pheasant observations up 19%. Nesting and brood rearing conditions this summer were favorable, especially for quail. For both pheasants and quail, where you can find high quality habitat, expect to find good numbers of birds. Also, for quail, you may find more coveys than normal in marginal habitat this year. Here's to hoping another mild winter will set us up for another population increase next season. The expectation for cottontails is not as rosy, with results from our roadkill survey pointing to an 11% decrease in rabbits from the 2023 survey. Expect fair to poor hunting this season, even in areas with better quality habitat. Upland small game populations and hunter numbers have steadily decreased over the past several decades. We need your help in reversing these trends. Getting as much high-quality grassland and shrubland habitat out on the landscape as possible is vital for promoting these species. No matter what you believe to be the cause of their decline, disease, predation, land use change, and climate change are some of the examples. There is only one way to alleviate them from those stresses and rebound their numbers, and that is through the building of habitat, utilizing native species of grasses, wildflowers, and shrubs. Some of the most impactful ways to improve habitat is to reduce mowing activities, to leave more cover, especially during the nesting season, convert stands of fescue and brome to diverse plantings of native bunch grasses and wildflowers, and remove stands of non-native invasive brush like autumn olive and bush honeysuckle. Also, upland small game hunting is a great way to introduce new hunters to the sport. So do your part in supporting our hunting heritage this season by taking prospective youth or adult hunters in the field with you. Help us to, again, make small game hunting the gateway for recruiting new hunters.
Perfect. Thanks, Don. So yeah, I know Lauren, we were chatting before we kind of hopped on, and you're particularly excited about the rabbit season. So looking forward to getting out there for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. My dog's not quite ready yet. We're still working on
it's a process.
Not being terrified of gunshots, but he's getting it. He's starting to understand what he's supposed to do. So just, I think, continuing to practice. And I think too, when he realizes like, oh, hey, like there's a rabbit at the end of this, he'll be a little more excited. But
yeah,
we're working on it, but I'm quite excited to go out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, one more quick reminder, and then we'll kind of jump into the bulk of this episode. Obviously, it's hard to think about spring already, and we've kind of mentioned this every podcast so far in the past couple weeks. But it is now time to think about spring turkey hunting. The lottery application for the first application for spring turkey permits is open. It opened on October 1st and runs through December 1st, 2024. So you still got a little bit of time, but definitely don't let that date sneak up on you. During this first lottery, it's Illinois residents only, and you can apply for one permit. Now, group hunt applications are accepted during the first lottery. So what this means is you can have up to 6 people on your application. It does not impact your statistical chance of drawing either in the positive or the negative. But what it does ensure is if you draw, everybody in your party will draw. So if you want to hunt as a group, it's kind of an all or nothing type lottery, but you can put a group hunt application in during the first lottery. But other than that, it's deer season. Archery season has currently been open for about a month. Firearm deer season is coming very quickly. So the first firearm season is November 22nd through the 24th. And then December 5th through December 8th is going to be that second firearm period. So things are coming quick. I personally haven't got out as much as I hoped to yet in the deer woods, but looking at the forecast in the next couple days, and especially with this crop progress report, I'm definitely starting to get excited. And I know Curtis, you were out just kind of doing some scouting a couple days ago, and you started to see a lot of bucks kind of up on their feet, moving around, searching. So things are definitely happening out there.
Oh yeah, and rubs, I visited, scouted 2 different times, and definitely new rubs popping up all the time. So we're in that time of year where probably every time you come out to the woods, there might be new sign, rubs, scrapes. I know people are very shy about, I guess, scouting right now because it's prime hunting time, but you got to get information when you can. And if you can low impact scout kind of while you're walking out or to your spot, definitely do that, because some new sign that could impact the way you hunt is going to be appearing in these next few days. And keep your eyes peeled. It's going to teach you about deer. But it's just cool. It's cool to see all this stuff and try to figure out what they're doing and why. I did find first scrapes of the year for me on, when was that? Sunday, I guess. No way. Last weekend, anyway. I think it was actually Friday. Yeah, Friday. So I found my first scrapes on Friday, but been finding rubs for well over a week.
Yeah, it's definitely that time of year. And for me, one of the cool things about still scouting is not only does it give you just kind of up-to-date information, but for me personally, I find it to be almost a confidence boost too. If I'm sitting in an area and I just, for whatever reason, am not seeing the level of activity that I think, we as hunters second guess and like question every decision we've made throughout that process. And just seeing some new sign in an area, oftentimes we'll be like, okay, you know what? I am still onto something. It's just for whatever reason, they're just not coming through here today or the past couple of days, but the sign is still looks good. And so I'm a big proponent of continuing to scout throughout hunting season. I would say, you know, obviously I'm a public land hunter, so I try to be very conscious of other hunters. And so for me, what that means is I'm not scouting at like 7:00 in the morning. I like those midday scouts when everybody's usually already back at the truck or headed off to go grab a bite to eat. That's when I like to do a little bit of scouting. Again, I try not to walk through a bedding area and try to stay, you know, as low impact as possible. But especially on public land, I don't know how you can continue to hunt to the greatest success that you can without scouting throughout the season. So big fan of that for sure.
Plus, it's public land, so people are walking out there. So
yeah,
it's hard to say, oh, I don't want to disturb this deer with any human scent. Well, are squirrel hunters going out there? Are dog walkers going out there? Mushroom hunters? I mean, you know, you should be conscious of it. But yeah, I think the scouting, the benefits outweigh the downfalls for sure.
Agreed. And I don't have a ton of kind of in-season time. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say that that also helps you not just give you confidence that you're in the right spot, but also maybe give you some more information to move if you have to. I mean, if you were in a new spot and you got set up, you could have been 50 yards away from them and not be able to see them, depending on how thick you're in. And then you just move that 50 yards. Next thing you know, you're right on their travel path. So you're hunting this one spot, and there's this rub line that you didn't see before that now appears. You can follow that down, and maybe you're just where they're at when it's nighttime out, and you follow that down to where they're at when it's daytime out. And might have success that way. So that gives you some information on where to move to, too, for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, especially in a landscape like Illinois, I often find myself not thinking about the terrain and the topography all the time, just because it's so relatively flat. But there's a lot of cases where I've set up in an area and I'm like, man, why am I not seeing deer? And then you just change your elevation a little bit, change your angle, and you see, oh, there's a little draw just a little knoll that I can't really see, that all the deer activity is on the other side of it. And so, yeah, like you said, just a little bit of scouting can help you just kind of move in that direction a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of feel like hunters, like we always have our first instinct, and then we have a second guess, and we have a third guess, or maybe more than that. But out of those three, like there's usually one that's right. And so you got to pick which one is going to be right. Like we just heard one of our friends was turkey hunting, and he was sitting in a good spot, and he wanted to leave, right? See some new country. And as soon as he left, guess what? Turkeys popped out right from where the place that he had just vacated. So obviously his first guess was right, but he went with his second guess, and that was not right. But we've all had times where we've been sitting somewhere, and then we're like, we should move just right over there. And then we do, and it works. So you got to pick what's right. Your initial thought, your second guess, or is it your third guess after you have time to overthink it? For me, I think it's usually the second guess that's best.
It's so funny how we all overthink things, and especially with deer, we almost give deer like this, I don't know, almost mythical like skill set to avoid humans, where 90% of the time it's decisions that we make as hunters that either, you know, cause us to be successful or unsuccessful. But we always assign these like mythical behaviors to deer. I find that pretty interesting. But I know for me, I'm really getting excited, and you know, we want to talk about rut. Rut is right around the corner. Personally, my favorite day to be in the woods, if you've, you know, hunted with me before or heard me talk, is Halloween. So we're just a few days away from that. And I think what Curtis has already kind of hinted at and what he's seen out of the landscape when he was out scouting kind of illustrates 100% why. You're going to start seeing a lot more daylight activity, especially as the testosterone levels start to increase in bucks. They're going to start expanding their home range a little bit. They're going to start searching for that first doe that's in estrus. And so for me personally, this next like week and a half, is going to be really focused on hunting does. And for a lot of people, that may seem counterintuitive, but if you think about it, what are the bucks looking for this time of year? They're trying to find does to breed. And so I want to hunt the limiting resource, and the limiting resource for this time of year is going to be those does. The bucks are going to be trying to find them. So my strategy going into this week and probably the next is to get either on the downwind side of a common doe bedding area, or as well as a feeding area, depending on what the current landscape looks like. But I just know the public land I hunt, 90% of the time they're hitting food sources. It's after dark. And so for me, I like to get more on that bedding side, just because I know there's going to be does in there throughout the day, and chances are bucks are going to be cruising throughout the day. And this is the time of year I personally do a lot of full day sits. I'll sit up in the stand. I may get down, go to the bathroom, grab a quick bite to eat, but I'm not avoiding midday. I have had arguably my greatest success this time of year during rut has been in midday. And I think a lot of that is due to public land. I think these deer start to pick up that people leave the woods, things start to calm down. And so there really does seem to be a big uptick in kind of that midday activity. But I know, Jason, you're planning on getting out a little bit next week. What's your strategy going into it?
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple spots. I have not been out this season, and I've hunted the public land that we've hunted a couple times now, to where I just have spots at this point that I'm going to do a try first before I give up and move on to somewhere else. Because I've seen a lot of activity at these spots over the years pretty consistently. But so basically, the travel corridor is one of them. That's along river and a field, and it's a pinch point. So I'll hunt that in the mornings to see a travel corridor. Usually going from bed to feed with that. And then depending on when the wind's blowing, my other favorite spot would be along a meadow that's on top of a ridge. And I think we've even used this example in some of our webinars, but hunt the downwind side of this meadow, because that's where the bucks are going to be checking. It's a doe bedding area. So depending on which way the wind's blowing is where I'll set up. But ones will be a travel corridor that is mixed with bedding along the river. And then there's a what we call a sanctuary to the south of it as well. And if the wind's going really well, I might even push into that sanctuary and try to get a buck coming in and out of that. And that'd be buck bedding. So if I was hunting the does and the wind, I would hunt that meadow on top of the ridge. And then if I wanted food and buck beds, I'd hunt along the river where I've been hunting. So those are my three spots I usually hit up. How about you?
Yeah, pretty similar concept. Again, going to focus on the downwind side of bedding areas. And one of the places I've been hunting for a couple of years, and it's pretty much the only place I've actually hunted deer this year. It's a piece of public land that is in one of these counties where I couldn't harvest an antlerless deer during the month of October. So unfortunately, a lot of my sits have just been sitting there watching a lot of antlerless deer walk by my tree and not being able to do a darn thing about it. But it gave me a lot of good information as to what these does are doing routinely. And so one of my spots out there, it's not necessarily near a bedding area, but it's a very common, kind of like you hinted at, a funnel or a pinch point that I have two large kind of slopes that basically funnel activity through this valley, because the deer don't like to go up slopes. They certainly will if they feel danger or it's kind of their only escape route. But a lot of times they're like humans. They like to take the path of least resistance. And so I've picked out this pinch point just because it's a very common area that does, if they want to funnel from the bedding area to the feeding area, they have to go through this little pinch point. So the nice thing about this pinch point is I can hunt it with either a north or a westerly wind, which for Illinois seem to be some of the most common wind directions we get this time of year. Obviously not today with this warm temperature. We're getting a lot of southerly winds, but here in the next little bit, once that wind starts to shift of that cold front that's hopefully coming down, should be able to sneak in there pretty easily. But again, it's just an area where does constantly filter through. And I even noticed when I was out there, I forget what day it was last week, but they're starting to like Curtis mentioned, scrapes are everywhere. I probably found 5 or 6 scrapes right along that little travel corridor. And I think, again, it's just a buck putting a scrape where he knows does are going to be consistently. So that's kind of my go-to strategy for the next little bit. I probably won't do a ton of calling unless I see a buck and it's, skirting me or 80, 90 yards away and I'm trying to bring it in a little bit closer. That's kind of my calling strategy. I don't do a lot of blind calling where I just call into the void, hoping an animal hears it and comes back. Because usually when you do that, they're going to sneak downwind of you, smell you, and kind of move on. So I like to be able to see that animal but before I call. But that's kind of my strategy, is to find the does, hunt the does, and hope something is following them.
We should point out, even if you're not interested in hunting deer, this is a time of year to be concerned about deer, because this is when traffic accidents with deer are at their peak. So you're going to see basically from now until probably pretty close to the firearm that deer accidents are going to be. You're going to see fresh deer, and a lot of times they're bucks. And because it's a lot of times this year, the testosterone's making the bachelor group split up, right? So the biggest buck gets to keep the home territory he wants. Everybody else gets run out. So everybody, the 2.5, 3.5, 4.5-year-old bucks that get pushed out of their territory are moving into unknown spots, and these unknown spots have unknown roads. And this is probably the biggest contributing factor to all these automobile accidents, is these deer don't know where the roads are. And at night, because of the way deer vision work, when they see light, they don't see a car. They see a light. You know, it looks like a bright light. What do they think's happening? I don't know. They think a deer angel is coming to visit them. I'm not sure, but it makes sense why they don't run away. Is just the way their eyes are fixated. They're on low light. Boom, a bright light hits them. All they see is bright light. So that's kind of why they freeze in the headlights. But most deer are in home territories. They know where roads are. So when they see anything frightening, they can avoid those. But when they're in spots they don't know, all bets are off. So watch out, especially if you drive a small car, because small cars versus big deer doesn't usually end well for either party. So be careful, especially at dusk and dawn.
Good point. Well said.
And if you do hit one and want to take it home, don't forget you have to contact IDNR to claim it.
Salvage tag. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And the nice thing is you can do that completely online. There is a salvage permit process. So if you are interested and you happen to hit a deer with your car, now the way the law, quote unquote, works, at least from my understanding, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. The person who hits the deer usually gets first dibs on that carcass if they want it. So just kind of keep that in mind, that if you're following along somebody and they happen to hit a deer and you try to grab it, the person who technically hit the deer does get kind of first choice or first option to claim that carcass before anybody else.
Yeah, if there's any street disputes on freshly hit roadkill, probably paper, rock, scissors might be a good way to determine. I don't think that happens too much anymore, but
I wouldn't imagine, but you never know.
Yeah,
I don't know. My mom's in Maryland, but
oh, there you go.
She hit one a couple years ago and had like 3 different pickup trucks stop and was they were like, "Hey, are you gonna take that home?"
Hey, meat's meat.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we were driving to go hunting. So Dad and I are in camouflage driving in the truck to go hunting, and we come down the road. We're within a quarter mile of the parking spot, and there was like I think it was an old folks' homes mini shuttle bus that was on the road, and the bus driver was out. It was a woman, and we saw that there was a fresh roadkill, and we were like, "Hey, we're going hunting. We'll take it. If you just hit this, we'll take it." And then the lady's like, "Nope, I just made my last stop." And she opened up the safety hatch on the back of the bus and chucked the deer in the back of the bus. we're like, "All right, well, have a good day." So there's Pennsylvania for you. But yeah, no, that was awesome.
So apparently it's a very East Coast thing.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Yep. So any other updates or strategies you want to talk about, Dan?
Yeah, so for me, I'm kind of at the stage of my season. Obviously, again, I haven't spent a ton of time out there really getting ready to hit it hard in the next couple of weeks, both my personal hunting as well as I've got a ton of mentored hunts coming up. So throughout the next couple of weeks, that's kind of my primary strategy. But on a personal level, I kind of talked about hunting downwind side of bedding areas. I'm also really focused on my firearm tag. I finally drew a firearm tag for an area that I've been trying to draw for quite some time, and it's been several years since I drew it. So a lot of what I'm going to be focused on throughout the next couple of weeks is getting ready for that hunt. Not only just hunting, with my archery equipment, but also trying to refine my strategy for that specific hunt. So really excited about that. Need to get out to the range and shoot my shotgun a little bit to make sure I'm dialed in. But I drew a permit. My wife drew a permit for a separate piece of public land. I think the same one that you actually drew, Jason. So we'll have to kind of coordinate there. But really looking forward to it. I always enjoy firearm hunting. You just don't get to do it a lot, and so when the opportunity presents itself, it's a little bit special. Especially last time I hunted the public land that I'll be hunting, I harvested this deer at about 1:00 in the afternoon on a day that was probably 75 or 80 degrees. I know, Jason, you helped me drag it out of the woods, and we were sweating bullets in our t-shirts and just our blaze orange vests at that point because it was so hot. So looking forward to getting back out there with the good old shotgun in the hand. So a lot of my emphasis the next couple of weeks is just going to be refining my strategy for that.
So my household's been lucky. We're already eating on deer from this year.
Can't argue with that.
First one, second day of the season. Private land, not public, but he was supposed to be turkey hunting and called me at like 7:00 at night and was like, hey. So I was like,
I got something a little bigger than a turkey.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh, congratulations. And then I was like, crap. Like, this is
now the work begins.
I was like, this is going to be a lot more work than a turkey. These guys were kind enough to workshop because he used a crossbow that went through the deer, and in very nice daylight, we eventually finally saw a very faint smudge of blood that honestly we could have put on there by, when we picked it up. But yeah, that was an adventure. So, and that's a good example too of your first instinct, right? Because my husband Jacob thought, he hit the deer and then found the crossbow, didn't find any blood really. So was definitely second, third, fourth guessing himself by the time I got there. So
yeah, it's one of those things that for me, especially that hit and what your immediate thought is normally pretty accurate. Because he called me within minutes of taking the shot, and he was so pumped up. He's like, man, the shot felt great. Felt like it hit a double lung. And then as he started to like you said, look for the arrow, look for blood, he just wasn't finding anything. But like you said, a lot of times that first instinct, especially right after a shot, is normally pretty accurate.
Well, when he was like, oh, like, I don't, like, he was like, hey, maybe I didn't hit it at all. I was kind of like, he's pretty good with, firearms, the crossbow. Like, so I watched him sight in the crossbow. So I'm like, I find it hard to believe he just, like, completely missed.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we had the dog with us because he did actually find a tiny little blood trail. And then I found the deer. It was definitely a team effort on this one.
And it didn't even run, but what, 70 or 80 yards, it seemed like?
Yeah, no, it didn't go that far. It's just the way it went through brush made it kind of hard. And like I said, there was almost no blood. It was just a couple little spiders here and there. So.
And that's one of the challenges, especially with hunting from the ground with archer equipment. If you think about an animal, or let's just a deer, how high that cavity has to fill up with blood. It's kind of like a bucket. If I were to put a hole in my cup up here, this whole thing has to start filling up before anything starts to drip out. And so when you're on the ground, those entry and exit holes are pretty much completely horizontal or parallel to the ground. Where when you're elevated in a tree stand, you're normally going to have that exit that's kind of coming down out of the animal and really pumps a lot more blood out of that carcass. So that's a really good point. When you're on the ground, you may not have the level of blood trail that you're envisioning.
And with the crossbow too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we've heard that multiple times. We don't know 100% the science behind it, but something about crossbow moving faster bolt, concavation, or swamp gas refracting off of Venus or something. I don't know what it is, but even the deer trackers are saying they're not finding blood trails with crossbows that they do with the vertical bows. Not sure why. They don't start as early, and especially they're just in general not as heavy of a blood trail. Not always. Some people shoot with a crossbow.
Without the dog, we never would have found it because he just pounced on it. So we're like, oh, okay. And then we're, doing the sort of close search until it just vanished. And then eventually I found the deer. It was not... and you could tell like he'd obviously bled out like through the nose and mouth when he went down, but
it makes you think, are there deer, that might be good hits? People find a bolt, there's no blood, they don't see any blood, and they're like, well, I guess I just missed it, but maybe they did not. So definitely, you think you hit it, you got to be real go into CSI mode at that point.
Yeah. For me, it's one of those things. If you make the decision to take a shot and to pull that trigger, it's kind of your responsibility to the animal, to wildlife, to the natural resource to do whatever you can to either prove that you completely missed it or prove that you hit it. I mean, Jason, I think you could probably tell a story of a mentor hunt a few years ago that we took a shot. One of your mentees took a shot at a nice buck, and we were not sure if he hit it. We weren't sure if he missed it. We never found the bolt. We searched probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours.
It felt like because it was a shot within 20 yards at a broadside buck. I mean, there were some limbs in the way that he could have hit, and also it was his first deer he was shooting at. He'd fallen asleep. I woke him up to take the shot. It was in the morning, and so a lot going on for this fella. But we were on that ridge, and we couldn't find the bolt. And I couldn't, and also it was an angle that I couldn't see the shot because we were on a fawn down log, and he actually, we were sitting looking to the west, and then when the deer came out to the south and then moved to the east, he went on the other side of the log and used the log as a rest, which even made me even more curious of how he missed. But like I said, there was maybe some limbs in the way, but the log was blocking my view, and I couldn't get up to look, so I didn't even get to see where the shot went. So that added to my frustration where I couldn't have even watched. But we went, and the deer went away, and we couldn't tell if it was hit or not. And then you guys were all out mentor hunting as well, so we all met in a parking lot and went over and tried to look for it. And we tried calling dogs in, but everybody was busy that day, and we would have had to wait till nighttime anyway to look for it with the public land that we're on, their regulations. But we went looking around forever, and we were finding, I was shocked at whatever we were finding. I mean, I don't know if we were finding bird poop on leaves or what, but we were finding red droplets throughout the woods, but it was hard to tell. And that's a good reason to have like hydrogen peroxide with you to spray on it and see if it bubbles or not, because we couldn't tell exactly what we were looking at, but it was red, and we were trying to we were more following the tracks in the leaves than we were any blood sign. And then on our way back after we gave up, and after many hours, we walked back and we were on the same ridge, and then we found one of the crossbow fletchings was on the ground, and it was clean, and it was white, and it was completely clean, and it was just laying there. And we were next to a ridge, but I didn't think we were close enough to it to where if he would have shot even through a deer or over a deer, that it would, unless he shot like arching upward, that the arrow could have went over and off that ridge. And I mean, that was probably like an 80-foot ridge. I don't know, but we weren't going to get down there and be able to find that arrow once it gets off that ridge. I mean, it was going to go down in some thick stuff. So, and long story short, we couldn't find the arrow, couldn't find any sign, and we didn't know. We looked forever to try to find it, and then we found that fletching. So I think maybe the fletching may have been messed with or broken, and then he shot it, and then it just went crazy, or maybe he hit a limb and the fletching got knocked off. Either way, we found the fletching in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, we only found one of Jacob's fletchings, and it was cleaned. I mean, it was dirty because it hit the dirt, but we didn't see any blood on it either. We never did find the second one. No idea, like, what, the other, like, where that went. But it's entirely possible it was in the deer somewhere. It was very dark. So,
yeah.
So, but that was an adventure. And if we hadn't found it, we would have been going back bright and early the next morning.
But I think this is a good way to kind of remind, especially as a new hunter, one thing that I like to make people cognizant of and to think about is if you harvest or if you take a shot tonight, do you have hours to potentially spend trying to recover that animal? Then once you recover, do you have more hours trying to get that animal out of the field? I know for, me, I can go out if I have 2 or 3 hours in the evening, and I can probably tell myself I can get this carcass found, I can get it out of there, be done. But there's plenty of times where I will not hunt, even if the weather's perfect, the wind's perfect, because I have something to do, later that evening, or maybe even the next morning, to where if I were to make a bad shot, I wouldn't be able to go out the next morning. So these are all things that I'm consciously thinking of when I go out, is not only does the weather and the conditions seem right to harvest a deer, but do I have the time and stuff to be able to do that?
Yeah, we definitely made a rule in my house now that we're not doing weeknights anymore for
yeah.
And nights
long
in general.
night was it?
What?
Long night was it?
Yeah, it was. I'm trying to think. I think I still worked the next day, but he took off because it was like a Wednesday, I think, or Thursday. He ended up taking off like the day after. But I was like, all right, like on my lunch break, like I need to go get ice for the cooler. Like, because it was a warm day, like it was early October, so it was just. He was funny when we got back that evening after dealing with all of it. he was like, maybe I'll just stick to geese. And like he's come back from that, but that was his initial it's like that was a lot of work. And then
it's a lot of work.
And then we were gone that whole weekend for that becoming an outdoorswoman. So he had to process all of it himself. So
which kudos, especially for your first one. That's really cool to go through that entire process.
Yep,
love that.
And we've had it twice now. CWG results were negative. It's been very tasty. So
love it.
And we have a leg for a future butchering workshop ready to go. So
even
stay
better
tuned for that, everybody.
And various birds from Mr. Freddie Reyes. So we've got all the ingredients for a pretty decent game butchering workshop. So we don't have that posted yet, but watch everybody, because that one, when it does get posted, is probably going to fill up because hey, it's fun to get hands-on, and we don't get that many opportunities to get our hands on critters, much less a smorgasbord of different birds and venison. So keep an eye out for that. Should be coming here in the next week or two.
And especially if you've never broken down an animal before, it's helpful to be like, even if I do this wrong, it's not the end of the world because you can do it again. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. I went to one that these guys did back in February, and I know my husband in particular was very like, okay, like we can do this. Like it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it seems intimidating because the deer is pretty large, but like it really is. It is doable.
Just think of it as like 30 rabbits connected all together.
Yeah. Squirrel. Honestly, I think the squirrel was more traumatic for him than the deer was, but
maybe because of the tattoo.
Maybe, yeah. Yes, he did get it. My husband did get a tattoo of the first animal he harvested, which was a gray squirrel. He's grateful.
There's probably not many people that have a tattoo of a squirrel. That's cool. I like that.
Yep.
But yeah, any other kind of last minute thoughts?
Not really. Just looking forward.
I'm getting out. That's the thing with
you getting it.
As you learn, yeah. One, I wish I would have been out earlier than now, and especially now it's 80 degrees the next 2 days. But I got to get out. But you can, as you get older, and you don't lose the drive as much, but you get smarter, and then you pick the days you go, and you can get more picky. You'll hunt less, but see more deer, and that's what I keep telling myself. I'm like, well, when I do get out, it's going to be the right time. So I'm not forcing anything. There's so many times when I was a kid that I just went to go sit, just to go. And you got to do that kind of in the beginning just to get out and learn, because you can't, getting out as much as you can, you're going to learn more quicker. But you also might learn what not to do, which would be getting out too much. So, and you burn yourself out. So I'm ready for a rut for sure. I'm so psyched for this weather to change. After these 280-degree days go away, I think Friday looks great. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited.
But like you said, burnout is real. I mean, I experienced it. Not last year. I mean, it's been a while since I've experienced it, but where I get so excited for deer season that I hunt the snot out of like those first 2 weeks of October. Mm-hmm. And then the list at home starts to build. And by the time the weather conditions are right, the activity is where I want it. Boom. I have, a million things on my chore list at home to get done, whether it's yard work, repair, whatever, stuff like that. So I think there really is something to be said to taking it slow, managing your enthusiasm, and try to hunt the days that are best. But again, hunt when you can, for sure. But I know it especially deer season for me, I get bored after a while. I really like talking and hanging out with people, and so sitting alone in a tree for a week or two in a row starts to get a little tiresome. So I'm like you, I've started to really kind of refocus my effort and try to maximize my time afield as much as possible.
Yep. See, I've been busy tailgating the Illini. I've been busy tailgating the Illini games and going to Halloween parties and stuff. I'm done talking to people. I want to sit in a tree.
I need my solitude.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like all the deer sign I've seen has been from out running the dogs with rabbits or squirrel hunting. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Dan, there was a lady in Northern California. I think she set the Guinness World Record for time in a tree. She spent over a year in a tree.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
To keep it from being, she would have made an excellent deer hunter.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, and I think tempering your expectations too. Like, you're probably not going to get a deer in the first 30 minutes you're out there on public land.
Unless your name's Jacob.
Yeah, unless you're my husband, in which case you just hang out behind a lawnmower to hide your tennis shoes because you forgot your boots. I don't want to say he didn't deserve this deer, but like, it was
opportunistic for sure.
Yes, it worked out well for him, shall we say. He was going turkey hunting and found a deer instead of the other way around.
Hey, whatever works out.
Take it where you can get it.
Yeah.
What do they
So, but I'm
say?
just saying, generally, especially on public land, that's not going to be as likely.
Yeah, no, I think since you go ahead,
I'm
Jason.
sorry. I was going to say, is he going back out after the turkeys now? Is he have plans to go out for the turkey on that property there?
He's
He
still
wants to go deer hunting
recouping.
this weekend.
He wants to go deer hunting again?
This weekend, yes.
Oh,
Good
He
for
was trying to
him.
get off Friday to go.
he's a
Because
deer
he's like,
hunter
oh,
now.
well, you're home this weekend, so if I get one, we can see how long it takes for two people to process it. And I was like, I did not sign up for this, and also rabbits opens, so
If he goes deer hunting, he'll probably get a turkey. That'll be perfect.
I know, right? That's what I was like, all right, fine, go deer hunting. Like,
Got Thanksgiving coming up.
yep,
Mhm.
yep.
I
Probably
can't
gets
believe
a little
October's
bummed out.
almost over. What the heck happened?
Dude.
Whew.
Wow.
Yeah, this temp doesn't feel like it. Feels like we should be getting some baits and going fishing the river for flatheads or just getting off the nest.
Yeah.
But it's
I'll
almost
say, yeah, this
November.
wind is why my dog's freaking out because it keeps catching stuff it doesn't usually
Just
catch.
little stuff moving. Yeah.
Mhm.
But one more kind of closing thought that you kind of brought up, Lauren. I think it is important to mention, don't compare yourself to what you see on social media. I know when I first started getting into deer hunting, it was kind of right around the time that Facebook and MySpace were really starting to take hold, and the hunting community had really started to shift to be more kind of online focused. And so I was constantly comparing myself to these hunters who are oftentimes hunting private ranches with a very carefully managed deer herd, a very carefully, managed hunting strategy and things like that. So don't always compare yourself to what you see others doing on social media. Everybody has their own hunting story. Everyone has their own strategy. Just kind of let yours develop how it's going to develop. And if you have any questions throughout the next couple of weeks, reach out to us. We're happy to help. And if you have any success, we always like to hear stories, see pictures, see videos. And if you have a good story, maybe we'll bring you on a podcast in the future and you can tell that. Because I think there's one of the really cool things about hunting is no matter how successful or level of failure your hunt turned into, there's always a learning experience for others in those hunts. So if anybody's willing to come on and share some of those stories with our listeners, we're happy to help and happy to have you on.
It's very much a destination, not the journey kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Like, even if you just end up watching birds or learning different trees, like, you're getting something out of it besides, especially with deer hunting when you're just kind of sitting.
Yeah, there's a lot of adventures to be found out there, some good, some bad, but they all make memories that will basically take over everything else that plays in your mind. So all your mindless times of sitting watching TV or going to bar, like, they don't stand a chance to even your bad times out hunting. Your bad times out hunting become better stories than that. So what does that tell you about your good times out hunting? It tells you need to get outside and get out there and do something. A lot of cool stuff
You
happening
want to
right
bond
now.
with your spouse or your friend, have them help you drag a deer out.
It's a good workout. Then you get to skip like a whole week of workouts after dragging a deer out. That counts as a whole week.
Yeah, it's your leg day for the week.
Jacob was like, he's like, I'm glad I'm squatting properly. He's like, but I wasn't prepared how much my butt muscles were gonna hurt after like gutting that deer, like just crouched over it for so long.
Oh,
I'm just
you'll
gonna hate
find
to
your
say that,
weakest link. When you drag a deer out, you find what you need to work out after that. You're like, okay, this is what I need to work on. So it'll tell you.
For me, it's a lot of times the hip flexor, especially if I'm having to like pull through, prairie vegetation.
Yeah.
Man, that thing just starts to burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll get you even upland hunting for long days.
Yeah,
looking for
yeah.
the grass, or duck hunting in the waders. It's because I feel like we don't use that muscle a ton. We don't need a lot of power to swing our foot forward, and so when you need more than usual, it's a good workout. I don't know what muscle that builds. I'm not sure if you could find it.
I don't either.
Wherever
I don't
it
know, every
is,
time I do
it'll feel you.
Every time I do the wing shooting clinics, I'm like, I need to do more ammo can raises just to practice just holding my arms up and out. Because there's nothing else I do day to day that, builds that muscle.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, my first couple days when I'm bow hunting, my left arm is like, I hold it up and I look like, you remember, what is it with Gene Wilder where he's the
Blazing
gunslinger?
Saddles.
Oh, it is. Yeah, but I shoot with this hand. But anyway,
Yeah.
after holding my bow, because think about it, your left hand, I'm holding my bow out for the entirety of almost a whole day. I could barely lift my left arm after doing that for 2 days last year. So I don't know how you work that out. Either walk around with a water bottle for 2 weeks before season like this or something. I don't know.
That or just put on a
Hound
bunch of
puppy.
puppet shows. Just
You
sit
need a
there
hound
and
puppy
get some
on a
puppets.
leash.
And
Yeah.
It's like having a fish on the line. You need to, and just walk them with your left hand. That's how I've been working out my left arm.
That could work, but that's the wrong kind of pressure. I need to hold, I need to,
Or you need a tall dog then.
Great thing.
Oktoberfest beer stein holding.
awesome. Well, good luck, everybody. If you're hit, go ahead, Jason. Sorry, what?
Was I delayed there? Oktoberfest beer stein holding contest. You ever see one of those? You get people up on stage to hold a giant beer stein out and see who can last the longest.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I bet that would be hard.
Oh, yeah.
That would be hard.
How many ounces is a normal beer stein? Is that like 32 or something, or what?
It's like a liter, I think.
Yeah, that could be a good way to do it, I guess.
All my exercises are around partying, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I went over to Jason's gym and it was just a bar. I don't know.
I mean, that's fine because all mine are dog related. So it's
Everyone's got their niche.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, good luck out there. Send us pictures, send us stories. If you have any questions, reach out. And again, stay tuned to all of our social media platforms, our website. We've got a couple events that'll be added here in the next little bit that we're pretty excited about. So stay tuned for those. But good luck and safe hunting out there.
We also have a brand new deer page up and running. So check that out too.
A lot of good resources. It kind of almost becomes like a hub of all the deer content we've ever put out. So definitely check that out. Good thought, Lauren. Awesome. All right. We'll see you in the next one.